Hi you guys, you can see I just got done with a heavy set of bench press. We're in the gym, and the reason we're in the gym, sorry about the background noise, is we're doing 3 B vitamins, B6, B9, and B12. They're involved in protein synthesis, and so I think a lot of times people think about the gym when they think about building, repairing, and regenerating muscle tissue. So it's a good place to do these 3 B vitamins. So the first one is vitamin B6. The B vitamins, as you guys know, were numbered when they were first discovered, but then the reason the numbering doesn't quite work out is because some of them thought they were vitamins and then were later discovered not to be vitamins. So anyways, B6. Scientific name for B6, I put the structure here, Jessica, if you can blow up on that a little bit. You guys will notice the pyrrole, it's a 6-sided ring with the nitrogen in it, that's a pyrrole, and this one actually happens to be pyridoxal phosphate because of the phosphate group. Pyridoxal phosphate is one of the active forms of vitamin B6, but pyridoxine, pyridoxal, and pyridoxamine, which would have the amine down here, the 2 hydrogens on the nitrogen group. So those are all active forms of vitamin B6, and the pyrrole ring is the needed part there to make vitamin B6. Main function of all 3 of these vitamins is to make proteins in your body. And you guys remember when you're making proteins, oftentimes we're repairing damaged tissue, we're regenerating new tissues, or in some case making new cells. All of the cell components are made of protein, and you need these 3 B vitamins in order to make proteins. I wrote down here, this is just a reminder, I think a lot of you know this already, the process of making a new protein involves transcription and translation. Transcription is taking the genetic code from the DNA inside the nucleus of a cell, transcribing that into RNA, and then taking that RNA, which codes for the sequence of amino acids, to make a new protein. It's kind of a simplistic picture here, but just reminds us the 2 main steps in protein synthesis. It involves converting the DNA, and again, inside the nucleus, the DNA is contained in the nucleus. You unwind the portion that you want to transcribe. That's transcribed into primarily messenger RNA, and then that moves outside the nucleus, and the rest of the cell you can make new proteins by putting the appropriate amino acids in the order, and that's called translation. So those of you who are familiar with those terms, if you're transcribing, you're using the same language, in this case, nucleic acid language. And then for translation, you're translating from one language into another. So you're translating the nucleic acid language into an amino acid language, and amino acids are linked together to make proteins. So vitamin B6, vitamin B9, and B12 are needed for making new proteins. Sorry, I keep flicking my fingers. The deficiency symptoms for all of these are poor protein production. So you have a difficult time repairing, regenerating tissues and making new cells if you lack any of these B vitamins. One thing that's unique, I put a star next to anemia. Anemia is when you lack enough red blood cells to carry oxygen in your blood. And y'all remember that red blood cells don't have a nucleus, and so red blood cells can't be repaired. And so if they get damaged, they get filtered out by the spleen and then completely regenerated in the bone marrow. So there's always this turnover of proteins, and if you don't have enough vitamin B6, you can become anemic. And actually, some of you are probably familiar with people that take supplements of either B6 or B12 in order to help prevent anemia. And this anemia is very different than iron deficient anemia that we're going to talk about later on. So good food sources for these protein-making vitamins are actually foods that are good sources of protein. Normally we think of dairy products as being, or things that contain whey protein as being the best sources of protein, but meats and animal products in general are good sources for vitamin B6, and we'll see in a second, vitamin B12. So good, that's vitamin B6. The next one is, sorry, I can't do this without licking my fingers apparently, B9. Okay, so actually no one uses the word B9 to describe folate, because B9 sounds like benign, and so lots of times people will forget the number with this and just refer to it as either folate, folacin, or folic acid. So a lot of times people talk about B6, B12, and folate, just to not sound like they're saying the word benign when they mean to say B9. So Scientific name for vitamin B9 is folate or folic acid. Main functions, just like all three of these, they're needed for manufacturing proteins. In this case, folate is needed in the production of new cells because it's involved in the production of DNA. And if you guys remember, every time you make a new cell, you have to replicate the DNA to put that into the nucleus of the new cell that you're making. So folate is important in DNA production. Interestingly enough, folate actually has a specific importance for women that are of childbearing years. That's if you think about what kind of process in the body needs to make the most new cells, that would be the formation of a fetus. So during pregnancy, it's very important to get enough folate. And I'll talk more about that in just a second. Main function is DNA synthesis, specifically for new cells. Like B6. In adults anyways, the deficiency of folate would be seen as anemia. Again, have a difficult time repairing and regenerating tissues. It would become most prevalent in seeing anemias. Good food sources, a little bit different than B6 and B12. Animal proteins are a good source of B6 and B12. For vitamin folate, green leafy vegetables are the best source. So it's a little counterintuitive. You need this for making proteins, but you get it from vegetables. So one more interesting fact about folate. Like I said before, it's very important for women that are of childbearing years. There's what's referred to as a critical period in the formation of the fetus, and in particular, a portion of the maturing cells called the neural tube. And if you lack enough folate to make new cells, you end up with what are referred to as neural tube defects. The two that are most common, I'll try to hold this still so Jessica can get on there. Spina bifida and both anencephaly and hydrocephaly. If you guys know anyone that has spina bifida, it influences the formation of neural crest so that the lower part of the spinal cord in the newborn baby, the cauda equina is poorly formed. And oftentimes they can have difficulty with full use of their legs and oftentimes their feet. And the picture there is of anencephaly. You can also get hydrocephaly with a folate deficiency. So it's important for women to get enough folate. Interestingly enough, oftentimes you need folate during a critical period, which is somewhere around week 6 of gestation up to week 9 or 12, depending on who you ask. And that's oftentimes a period of time when women are finding out that they're pregnancy, and one of the things that prenatal vitamins have in them is folate. So it's important to make sure you're getting enough green leafy vegetables if you're of childbearing years. And even some women will say, well, I'm not having sex, so I don't need to worry about folate. Remember the Virgin Mary. So she got pregnant without even having sex, so make sure you get enough folate. All right, the last one is B12. B12 is sometimes prescribed in injections because it can have a hard time being absorbed in older people's GI tract, but I put cobalamin as the scientific name for B12. Sometimes you'll hear people use the term cyanocobalamin. Cyanocobalamin, that's the active form of vitamin B12. Very similar to B6, it's needed for making new proteins, making new cells. Interestingly enough, you need B12 in order to metabolize folate, and folate is needed for the DNA. So B6, B12, and folate are all needed for protein repair, reproduction, generation of new cells. So hence, the reason we're in a gym is oftentimes people go to a gym to build more muscle tissue. You want to make sure you're eating these B vitamins in order to allow your body to be able to make those new cells and regenerate the ones that you already have. You guys have seen anemia for all of these. Okay, and again, anemia is an inability to reproduce cells at the same rate that they're used up. So my son's standing behind the cameraman lifting weights, and I can't help but laugh. So, fatigue, again, fatigue's a very non-specific symptom. It can be caused from a variety of nutrients, and probably not a reliable one that would be used. Just turn the camera on the mirror so you can see her. Yeah, that's good. All right. Good food sources, B6 and B12, same good food sources. If you're wanting to make new proteins, you need to eat proteins to be able to get these, and specifically animal products are a good source. When I say animal products, eating meat, eating eggs, eating dairy products are all animal products, are all animal derived and good sources of B6 and B12. I also added legumes for some of these. Legumes aren't a bad way of getting B6 and B12 for vegetarian. Good, B6, B12, and folate for protein production, repair, regeneration, growth of tissues, and reproduction of new cells. Good, back to my workout.